All right, let's start with a show of hands. How many of you have seen or been to Angkor Wat? Good, good, that's good. That's a good sign for me. Bagan in Myanmar. Cool, not so much, I expected. It's an up-and-coming place. It's a place that I hope will get the World Heritage Site status in a couple of years. Last one, Borobudur. Cool, more people as expected. So a fair bit of you have seen these places. When you think about archaeology in Southeast Asia, you tend to think about these giant temples. But today, this is not what I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about a different sort of archaeology, one that you've not seen in Southeast Asia. And they're called rock art, or what we call cave paintings or rock engravings. And behind me, you have examples from, let's see, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. They're found all over Southeast Asia. And there's a good reason why you may not have seen them. In the first place, some of them are quite remote. They're quite hard to get to. So this is Pedalin in Myanmar. It's a bit of a journey to get there. It takes about, you need to take a car, you drive there, and then you take a boat, and then you walk 2 hours, and then you get to the site. It takes about 6 hours to get there from Mandalay, which is already quite a place to get to. But it's a very special place because it is about 12,000 years old. Not the oldest place in Southeast Asia, but fairly old. And right throughout this cave, you find paintings of animals, mostly, but also this interesting set of hand designs where you see jewelry and tattoos. So just imagine thousands of years ago, people were already tattooing themselves, they were decorating themselves. A second reason you might not know about these places is because they are sometimes inaccessible or closed to public. So this is in Koh Phi Phi. Some of you might have been there in Krabi. It's a very popular tourist location. If you take a boat tour, they bring you out to this site, and they'll bring it outside because this is where they harvest birds' nests. So you can't really go in because it's an industrial site. But if you do get the chance to go into the site, you actually see the world's, Southeast Asia's largest collection of boat paintings. Koh Phi Phi was along the maritime Silk Route. It's in between India and China. So over time, people have gone there and they painted the ships that were on board. So you see examples of Thai junks, European caravels, Malay praus, steamships. And you can be sure that a lot of these ships would have stopped by in Singapore, either on their way to China or on their way to India. A third reason you might not know about these sites is because sometimes people don't know that there's rock art over there. This place is called Komnou in Cambodia. It's a fairly obscure site. It was discovered about 100 years ago. It's a Hindu site, Angkorian, 10th century, so it was carved in 1,000 years ago. But that's not the rock art there. This has been known for 100 years. 5 years ago, someone went round the corner and they discovered paintings on the other side of the boulder. And as you can see, it's fairly old. It's a red painting of what we think is a catfish, fairly faded. And the reason that we haven't known about it until now is because no one was looking for paintings like these. The fourth reason that we might not know about rock art in Southeast Asia is because sometimes sites don't exist anymore. So some of you might know this. This is the Singapore stone. It's located in the museum now. It was the first artifact to be found from Singapore. And it used to be located in the mouth of the Singapore River, where the old Malayan used to stand. And I was very happy that Tony showed us a picture of the old Malayan. So it's not there anymore, but if you go there now, you still see a sign that says this was where the old Malayan used to be. Now, the Singapore stone is like maybe yay big in the museum. If you read the early eyewitness accounts of the Singapore stone, it wasn't this small slab of sandstone. It was, in fact, a large boulder about 10 feet high and 9 feet wide. So quite literally, it was the size of an elephant. And in fact, there were a lot of large boulders in the area, and the English had to blow the entire place up because they needed to widen the mouth of the Singapore River. And one fragment now made its way to the National Museum, which is why we only see that now. But the point is, the very first archaeological site in Singapore is actually a rock art site. It was a natural landscape, it was carved by humans, and it was an important landmark in ancient times. Now, in the last decade, we've had a lot of good research being done just for rock art in Southeast Asia, and there's a good few reasons for that. We've got better technology, better dating methods. So I said that site from Myanmar is about 12,000 years old. That's not the oldest. The oldest site was discovered by my colleagues. Last year, they announced that it was 40,000 years old. It's one of the oldest sites in the world, not just Southeast Asia. We also have better recording techniques, better imaging techniques. So this site in Ipoh, I was just there earlier this week. It was discovered 55 years ago, and when it was first found, people said, oh, it's about 100 paintings in this site alone. Actually, the site is closer to 500 paintings just on this panel, and you can see bits of white in the tracings, and that's where the water has washed away. So for sure, there was more than 500 paintings on that wall. Also, with simple technology and digital cameras and simple software, we are able to recover a lot more of the image data than we would before with our naked eyes. So what looks like an ordinary wall is in fact an image of a pig. You can see the ears, you can see the hind legs, and you can also see shapes that you wouldn't have seen before normally. Here's another scene from the same cave, the same shelter. The first interpretation for this painting was it was a goat, because you had this animal and it had a head with horns. Actually, it's not a goat. It's another pig like we saw before. And what we thought the head and horns was actually a human figure with the arms right up there. In fact, if you look below, there are two more human figures with their arms up there, and they're holding pots. Now, this site is dated to about 10,000 years old. And so what we're seeing here is quite probably scenes from prehistoric life. The closest you can get to a time machine. Here's a special site from Myanmar. It was only just discovered this year, and I was lucky enough to take a look. It is an elephant, and if you can't see the elephant, that's the back and the neck over there. And after enhancing, you can see a bit more of the elephant now. But more importantly, that's not just the elephant over there. And there's actually two groups of people, one standing in the front and one standing at the side of the elephant. This elephant is actually life-size. It's a huge panel. And they've got striped designs on their body. So we're seeing ancient clothing from the past. The elephant also has a leash, and so what we're seeing here is a scene of elephant domestication. And if you read the ethnographic reports, in Cambodia we have teams of 3 going out to tame elephants, and here we've got a team of at least 3 people here. This is another scene of rock art in Laos. And the most obvious one is the man who is standing like this, and he's got the 3 stripes over there, and that's what we think of as a grass skirt. We have ethnographic examples of people just taking the skirt and then they form it into a seat to sit down in the jungle. And of course, you can see the human figures on the bottom right. Enhanced, you see a lot more paintings over there. First, you see the handprints beside the man. And also, you see figures of buffalo, bulls. In fact, there's a little man there who's holding a buffalo on a leash. So we have one of these early scenes of animal domestication. And archaeologists are always very interested about when animals are first domesticated, because it means we've stopped living in caves and we've started living in settled societies. That's not the interesting thing about that site. The interesting thing is that the paintings are located on a cliff face by the side of a river. The paintings that I just showed you, they're located up here. That's 10 meters off the surface of the water. You can see the boats on the bottom left, and it gives you a scale of the things. And that's not the only set of paintings on the cliff. There are, in fact, other clusters of paintings on the cliff. We don't know how the paintings got up there. We just know that they got up there. And that's part of the mystery of rock art. There's still a lot of questions to be asked about this. Was the water level higher before? We don't know. Was the river moving somewhere else before and it was dry land? We still don't know. The people rappelled down from the top of the cliff to paint them. That was another question too. So it's still, rock art is still very mysterious. People don't really know very much about them. Like, who made these paintings? For most cases, we're pretty sure that the majority of them are made by prehistoric hunter-gatherer peoples. And we still have hunter-gatherer peoples living in Southeast Asia. I mean, it's hard to imagine it in urbanized Singapore, but there are still people who live in jungles, who live high in the mountains in Southeast Asia. Why were they made? Rock art is a bit of a misnomer because it's not art like how you and I think about it. It's not drawing for fun or decoration. When we study living cultures, we see that rock art was used for a number of reasons. Ritual activities, they were used as territorial markers, like gang signs, and they'll tag your street corner. They're also used to storytelling or teaching aids, like hunt this animal, and that one doesn't taste as good. But most importantly, rock art is a visual history. It tells us how things were like in the past, and it tells us what people thought were important to them in the past, and that's interesting for me as an archaeologist, and interesting for us in a larger scale, because imagine 100, 200 years from now, another archaeologist like myself is going to be talking to an audience like yourself, and they'll say, well, back in the old days, humans drove around in cars. And yes, rock art still continues today. People think of them as graffiti, which as an archaeologist, it's not really, graffiti is a very valued term for me. It's very moralistic. Graffiti is bad, it's vandalism, it's ugly. For me, I'm more interested about how humans interacted with the landscape by painting or drawing on them. So there is still rock art going on today. In fact, in Ipoh, they've started painting the caves with beautiful scenes of art. So let's come back to Angkor Wat. When you spend your career looking at paintings on rock walls, you get really good at detecting them. So I was working there in 2010, and I saw faint traces of pigments on the walls of Angkor Wat. So like any researcher, I took photos of them, and I enhanced them in a computer. So I expected there's going to be something there. I didn't expect them to be quite as pretty as this. And it turns out that all throughout the temple, there are paintings on the walls of Angkor Wat. So I went back a couple of years later, and I went to my colleagues in Cambodia and said, hey, have you seen the paintings in Angkor Wat? And they said, yeah, we know about the paintings of Angkor Wat. And I said, no, have you seen these paintings? And no, they haven't. So they let me explore the paintings even more. And there's this myth that Angkor was abandoned and then it was rediscovered by the French in the 18th century, which is not true. The temple was always visited. It was always a pilgrimage site. And we've got accounts by the Chinese, by the Burmese, by the Portuguese, visiting Angkor Wat during the time where it was thought to be abandoned. People visited, they left their mark, and some of them left graffiti for sure. But we also do have a distinct set of paintings on the walls. And my current working theory is that this is when the temple was being converted from a Hindu temple into a Buddhist one. Because a lot of the art is Buddhist. This is like a stupa with a figure of a Buddha sitting inside. And the most spectacular of the paintings are located on the top level. If you've been to Angkor Wat, people almost never see these. They are composed of entire scenes of art. So instead of single paintings, this is a Khmer orchestra, gongs that's very related to the Malaysian gamelan, xylophones. You see the big semicircular thing in the middle? It's actually a ring of gongs. You still find it in Cambodian music today. So there's still a connection to the present. It's not very old, to maybe 300 or 400 years old. But it's really amazing that thousands of people, like yourselves, literally walk past the walls of Angkor Wat, looking at the architecture, looking at the carvings, and totally miss the fact that there are paintings on the walls of Angkor Wat. Much like how you do with rock art. And what else does rock art have to do with paintings on Angkor Wat? I find it interesting that our ancestors, early humans, lived in caves in the mountains and they drew on the walls. And then they built settled life and they built temples like Borobudur and Angkor and the ones in Bagan, which are meant to be representations of sacred mountains. And then they went back to them and then they drew on the walls again. So there's something very primal in this instinct to continue to paint and draw and mark the landscape. And as a species, we are unique in this. No other species seems to do this. This is something that makes us uniquely human. So I just want to end off with an interesting statistic for you. When we talk about rock art in general, people think of the Aboriginal art in Australia, people think of the cave art in France, and for a long time, people used to think that there wasn't any rock art in Southeast Asia, or wasn't worth studying. But what we have, in fact, if you really look closely at the research out there, is that we have at least 600 sites that we know of in Southeast Asia. And a lot of areas in the region that are unexplored, that are ripe for new discoveries. This is one of those areas where you are always finding new things, and I get an email every other month saying that they found something new somewhere in some place. So as much as you think that you know this world, in fact, there's a lot out there that we don't know and we haven't seen. Thank you.